Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Dave.
How
Thank
are you?
you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. What do you got there?
Crocheting a blanket. I started learning a few years back, and then I discovered that there's a lot of people, businesses that can use these. So,
Okay.
hospice, end-of-life care,
Yeah.
agencies for kids that are going into foster care. They arrive with nothing.
Right.
Women's shelters. They can often use blankets, and it's something that is theirs, right?
Right.
So, I can crochet in my chair and be comfortable and have neck support and back support. And it's something that I can be useful with and say God bless to someone.
I think it's important for all of us to find something that is useful or that we have purpose in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we go through difficult things, we question that. We wonder if there's still a reason, there's still a purpose. Like, what's the point? I can't do anything, or I can't do what I used to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we question, and sometimes depression sets in because, what good are we anymore, right? But it's important to understand that God isn't surprised by the things we go through, right?
And to remember that we are useful within our limitations. God will use us no matter where we're at. He will use us to impact someone else's life. We don't know how our stories will impact someone else's.
It's incredible
walk.
because we have an idea of what we want our sphere of influence to be, but it's usually quite different than that. And when you find people who come up and talk to you about ways in which you impacted their life, it's often not the people you thought or in the reason, like the things that you're doing that causes that to happen, right? And I think it's important for us to rethink some of our theology when it comes to suffering, when it comes to illness, when it comes to what God can heal.
I think, scriptures tell us all through the Bible, we will suffer on earth. It's in heaven that, God has promised us we will be renewed, we will be made whole.
Yep.
And, in heaven, one day, my falling apart spine will be made new and I won't have this pain anymore. Yeah. And I think that's something we can all hold on to because
definitely.
All around us are people that live with chronic disease or chronic pain. It may be something that someone was born with or someone had a tragic accident that now they live within this new normal, or maybe it was a diagnosis that came later in life. For myself, I've dealt with back pain for 20 plus years. I've had issues, and it started worsening in the end of 2016 to the point where I had to have medical intervention and surgeries. And, we need to remember that pain is not just physical, but it can attack people mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and it's how we try and handle that. It's not always easy, but I think it's important not to dwell in, I guess it's kind of like a pit. Like, it can be very similar to depression or living with grief, right? It just wants to claw you down, but you have to not dwell on that.
And how connected each of those three areas are, right? Our physical being, our mental well-being, our spiritual well-being. And we tend to attack them individually, but they're connected. Mm-hmm. You remember the story of Elijah when he gets fed by the ravens. He's just had the biggest victory of his ministry, defeat at Mount Carmel, and the fire comes down, and right? And then the queen, this is probably tells us a little bit about the power of a woman's word, but she threatens him, and he runs away scared. And he is depressed. He says, God, kill me when I'm not doing anything. I'm not any good. What's the point? And God says, have a Snickers, right? He says, here, take a nap, eat something, rest, and then 3 days later, he goes on a journey, right? And we don't have those connected. It's like, okay, when you're tired, you sleep. When you're sick, you take medicine. Like, that kind of thing is so backwards in our society, and even in the church where it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. We take it in, and we have to slow down there a little bit because our idea of healing is part right. God can heal, and He does heal. We
absolutely.
Aren't going to say that He won't heal, but He doesn't always heal.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing because we know God performs miracles every day.
Definitely.
But I believe that sometimes he chooses not to heal or not to heal fully.
Right.
And does that mean that he's forgotten about us? No. But he uses my pain story,
Yep.
what I've gone through, to impact others. I may not always know how that happens,
Yep.
but I had a conversation with a young woman this past summer. She had back surgery, and she was feeling down and discouraged about it, and she just felt like, oh, I wasn't doing anything, right?
Right.
So I just shared with her my story, and just little things, working and doing things within my physical limitations,
Yep.
and how we are useful to God,
Yeah.
even in our pain, even in our limitations.
Well, it's not like you're the only person that didn't get healed, right? And even when you think about it, the verse I'm thinking about putting on the front of the bulletin for this week is from 1 Timothy, and it talks about Paul tells Timothy to take a little wine with his supper, and it's taken out of context so much. People use that to justify alcohol consumption, but it's actually talking about healing. And so Paul, who had healed numerous people and could have healed Timothy, tells him to take some wine with his meal. It's a prescription, and that gives us a little bit of a hint on how healing works. Sometimes he does it miraculously, sometimes instantly, but sometimes God heals through medicine. Sometimes he heals through being with you through that process of dealing with the pain and coping with it. And I'm sure you've probably heard this. I know many people who have heard this from possibly well-meaning people, but you're not going through this because you don't have enough faith, that you're doing something wrong. Like sometimes the story of Job comes to life today, right?
Yeah.
Our friends come by and say, well, just confess your sin. Just have more faith. And then God will come through for you.
That reminds me of a story a long time ago now. It's not to do with my back, but it ties in. So 19 years ago, I got pregnant with my first child, with Andrew and I's first child. And every single day I prayed for that pregnancy. I prayed for a healthy body, a healthy baby, that he would be born well. And in the end, it turned out differently than I had planned, and I ended up having an emergency C-section.
Okay.
And it was right after that, someone said to me, well, you didn't have enough faith, and that's why you had to have a C-section. And I remember being extremely upset by that comment and hurt, because I knew it was not true. I had prayed every day, and yes, I had surgery, but I was healthy at the end, and in my arms was 10 pounds of adorable, chubby, healthy Jacob, right?
Yep.
So God answers prayer. He just may do it in a different way than we expect, and the outcome may be different than what we had thought or planned for.
I love that, because we often pray expecting certain things, and then when those expectations don't get met, we claim that God hasn't answered our prayer, right? And many times we're starting off from the wrong place. We have definitely the wrong purpose in mind, and we don't get to the place where we're understanding why these things are happening, right? And yeah, I mean, there are times where we do things that causes us to be sick or to be injured or to be, and there's responsibility there. And even in those cases, God can choose to heal, and even if he doesn't heal miraculously, you still have the process of going through, of finding value and worth and purpose in that, right? But to say that it's your fault because you're in this situation, when many times it has nothing to do with you, right? This is a genetic thing, right? There's something that happens that was someone else did something. So I know people who were in a car accident, and they were in the right, someone hit them, and now they're injured and dealing with the pain on an ongoing basis chronically, and then judgments that people have, right? I think we need to normalize the understanding that when we go through pain, people need our sympathy, our empathy. They're not looking for pity. They just want to know that they still belong, that they have a place.
And just to be caring and mindful, right?
Yeah.
Not to, and I don't think people are trying to be unkind when they say those kinds of comments. They maybe just don't know how to deal with someone or what to say to someone who is dealing with grief or depression or pain, right? When it's something chronic like that, well, it can affect everyone in your life, your spouse, your kids,
100%.
your job. I think for the most part, I handle my daily struggle with pain fairly well.
Yeah.
My kids might say differently, but I try to live life joyfully every day and to be thankful for how God has walked through this with me.
Yeah.
And I try to put on a smile. And some days it's harder, and
Sure.
some days, the thought of doing just that one little job, I know I'll pay for that later, or getting up and getting dressed and having a shower is just too much, right? But some days those tears come, and I think that that's okay. It's not to say,
100%.
people that struggle with chronic illness, chronic pain, they should never let the tears come. They should never cry, because that's a way of letting that out, right?
Well,
And
definitely, God gives us our emotions to
Yeah.
help process the things we deal with, and so you need to be using that sometimes, right?
yeah,
And understanding that it's not something you just deal with, like just man up and okay, I'm over it now because I'm going to have a will to go forward, right?
Yeah.
Like it's debilitating sometimes, it's overwhelming. And
Very much,
sometimes I know people that they have to manage their energy certain times of the week so that later in the week they can
yep,
do something, right? Otherwise, they're unable to. And I think many times what happens is when you're on the outside and you're not facing something like that, and by that I mean the person going through it plus their immediate family and friends, other people, they have an idea of what you're going through, but they haven't experienced it, right? Something about men and childbirth or something fits into there. But the idea of, well, yeah, I've got a sore back sometimes, right? That's not the same as what you've gone through, right? Like the idea of me going, well, if I was in that situation, yeah, it would hurt, but I'd still do this. What kind of person doesn't do these things? But you don't know what they're actually facing, right? You don't know what they're actually going through.
I think it's okay to say not to downgrade what someone else, because I don't know what someone else is going through. So if someone says to me, oh, my back hurts, but it's not what you're going through, but they don't know that, and I don't know what they're going through, right? So just having compassion and care, right? And how we talk to each other and how we support each other, and and it's okay to be honest sometimes. If someone says, how you doing? Most of us just say, oh, good, I'm fine, when really, nope, you want to say terrible today, right? Sometimes you just want to say terrible.
I think that takes us revisiting how we view our relationship with each other, right? Like we talk about and we're trying to build something about being a family, and in a family you can be honest with each other. Now you have to be considerate of people's time and the place and all of that, but you're not always okay, and that's okay. And I don't have any chronic illnesses or issues, but I'm not okay all the time, and that's okay. And so we need to figure out a way to have that conversation. It seems in the church we're either at one extreme or the other, right? And we don't know what to say. So you have an issue, you come to me, and I'm like, okay, I'll pray for you. And then I pray for you, and you're supposed to be better. And next week, you're not better. So what do I do with that? I don't know what to do with that. So we pray again, twice as much, twice as hard, and you're still not healed. And we're left with this, like, what's going on?
I think it is valid to ask questions.
Oh,
because,
certainly.
I personally have never been angry at God for my circumstances.
Yep.
I don't think that He's doing this to me, right?
Right.
But I do wonder sometimes if, my husband or my kids have thought, God, why didn't you heal my wife or my mom, right? Because mom can't do this, or,
And sometimes some of the burden falls on other people to pick up some of that slack, right? And that doesn't mean that it's possible that there is bitterness about that or regret, but it's not like you can do anything about it, right? But I do think you're right. Like sometimes what happens is we have this preconceived ideas of how it's supposed to work, and then when it doesn't work that way, we don't know what to do with it. Instead of leaning in and allowing God by His Spirit to walk us through that, to journey with that and say, look, I don't understand why it's not, it's not a magic lamp we rub and then all of a sudden all our wishes, dreams come true. He walks through the pain with us.
Yep.
He helps us find purpose in our limitations.
It's very true.
Paul, like I said, has a thorn in his side, right? In 2 Corinthians, it talks about God's grace manifesting in his weakness. And we want to see God's grace, but we don't want any of the weakness, right? And we need to revisit that in our theology. When you look in the scriptures over and over and over again, God is more powerful when people are less powerful. And yet we don't want anything bad to happen to us, right? And yet we still want some kind of story there.
Well, and I'm a different person than I was even, it's been a lot of years, right? But there were definite down days when it was really bad.
Yeah.
And I'm a different person now. God has walked with me through the good days and the bad days.
Yeah.
And he's brought me to where I am now. And
I think it's
you look back and you can be thankful for lessons learned when you're right in it.
Yeah.
It can be hard, right?
And I think for us to remember that even though we're having this conversation, you're still in it. Like, it doesn't mean we're at the end of the journey and we're like, oh, we've learned these lessons and it was all worth it, so right? Like, tomorrow might be terrible.
Yeah.
Right? Probably will be, because you have all this energy expanded here in front, right? And if we don't remember that, then sometimes it's like, oh, we got to the finish line, we got to the end date, right? So everything's better now. And sometimes you're not better. Like, we talk about the Exodus and how people came out under Moses, and that's wonderful, but there were generations that died in bondage and slavery in Egypt, right? 70 years in Babylon. People who left their homes, they didn't want to, they were taken, and they died in captivity. That's part of our story sometimes, and there's still purpose in that. It's harder to find sometimes, but there's still purpose and there's still usefulness in that. And so for us coming alongside, what are some things that we can do to show empathy, have compassion, not just have this silver bullet mentality of, oh, this is the answer, and all of a sudden all your troubles are going to go away. Because we want to be of service, right? We want to help.
Well, and I think for anyone living with chronic pain or daily pain, the days will be different, And
So an understanding.
So it's understanding and patience and, hey, how can I help you today?
Something tangible, or just like, hey, give me a call sometime.
Yeah, even
Right.
just someone coming to visit instead of expecting the
Yep.
person that's not well to go, right?
Yep.
Just little things, Or one time, my aunt and my cousin, they came and cleaned my bathrooms for me.
Yep.
That was a huge blessing,
Yep.
And it's not a nice job to clean a bathroom,
Right.
especially when it's not your own bathroom, but,
Right.
it was a huge blessing, and I appreciated that.
Yeah.
But just, I think checking in, especially, we don't sometimes know when people are dealing with chronic pain, chronic
Well,
illness.
if we only
right?
see you once a week and you're putting on a good show because, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, well, you must be doing way better. And maybe you're not. Maybe this is the one day that you're doing well, or well enough.
I try not to dwell on it, like I
Yeah.
said, and I try to put that smile on. And people have said that to me. They've asked, "How are you?" And I'll be honest, and I say, "You know what? I'm hurting right now." I would never know, they would say, but if all we're doing is being gloomy and dwelling in our pain, that's not healthy for us. It's
Yeah.
not healthy for our families. It's not healthy for those around us.
There needs to be a
right?
healthy balance in that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not about airing your dirty laundry every time, all the time,
Yeah.
right? But it is about being real. It is about, so just because you have chronic illness and you're having days where you're not doing well and you're putting on this face to say, I'm doing okay, how you doing? I'm fine, right? Maybe true, maybe not. Other people who aren't going through that, we do the same thing. Like, we've created an atmosphere where it seems like the right thing just to say everything's going well, because if we're struggling, it means we have a lack of faith. It means
But
we're not doing something.
we should be able to say how we are, because we are all brothers and sisters, and we're
Right.
supposed to love and support each other
Right.
and be understanding and have patience. So it should be okay,
Right.
especially within our church family, to say, I'm not okay today. I
Right.
would like prayer, and
And it's the vulnerability on both sides, right? To say, this is where I am at, do you still accept me? And then the other person to be like, hey, that opens up the opportunity for me to say, I'm not doing all right. Or, I am doing well, this is something that works for me, maybe try that. But it's not like only a solution, right? Sometimes when people have discussions, and men with their wives are terrible for this, because we find solutions for you instead of just listening to you. And sometimes the girls, they just want someone to hear rather than someone
you
to
don't
fix.
necessarily want the problem to be fixed for you or solved, but to just be able to it through. Like, this is how it
Without
was today.
judgment, without
Yeah.
pity, without, right, just that middle ground of we're together. I'm one of you. We belong, right? We're family.
And
Yeah.
for the person who is struggling, to always remember that God is walking alongside you every step of the way,
Yep.
and that you are useful to Him, you are loved by Him, you are not less because you have these limitations. That is so
Sometimes
important.
other people make comments that make you think that you're less, and you struggle with that all the time because you have limitations, physical, mental, whatever the case is, and so you already put yourself in that pit, right? And sometimes if you're not careful, you sit in it, and that depression starts to mount. And that's where you need some empathy. That's why you need a place where you belong so that you can show your usefulness.
Yeah.
The limitations don't hold you back. It's how we feel about those limitations.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it's a life-changing event.
Yeah.
It's a new normal. When
Yeah.
you go through something, if it's from birth, then that's just
Sure.
what you've known. But for someone that's, say, in a car accident and paralyzed, or
Yeah.
someone that's been given a diagnosis of a chronic disease, right?
Yeah.
Those things, that changes your life completely. And
Yeah.
now you live within your new normal,
Yeah.
right? So it's a mindset change it's a change for the person that's dealing with it. It's
Certainly.
a change for those around, because, if you were used to doing whatever you wanted to do whenever you wanted to do it,
Yeah.
and now you have to wait for someone to help you or
Yeah.
someone to do it for you, then that ties into your mental state and your emotions, right? So living with pain can just hit at you in so
Yeah.
many different ways.
It gnaws at you from all these different angles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think,
Something someone once said to me, this was years ago, and it ties in. It was more in regards to hurt, but it ties in with pain too. They had said, don't let your hurt damage the ministry of others hearing about Christ.
yeah,
And that stuck with me all these years.
yeah,
So I don't always feel great, no, but I work hard to put that smile on my face so that God can use my story to impact someone down the road.
you don't always feel good, but that doesn't mean you aren't good,
Yeah.
right? That you aren't doing well.
Yeah.
And I think it starts with us understanding a better perspective on how the theology is on suffering, right? Because in the West especially, we have this idea that health means that God is going to protect us from being sick. We're not going to get something, certainly not chronic, because he loves us so much. And then when we have people who are chronically ill or injured, then we are stuck with that question, well, doesn't he love them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't he have a use for them? What's the purpose in that? And it starts with not skipping over all the verses that talk about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Philippians 3:10, it talks about, and we'd like that part because it's like looking forward and back and all the reason, but he's like, I want to be like Jesus. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection, being like him in his suffering. It's like, we don't read that last line very much because we don't like suffering. We don't
Yeah.
want that. And you look through all the people in the scriptures, most of them had something massive that they had to deal with. That was a physical thing, a persecution thing, a mental issue, and we just sort of gloss over that and take all the benefits of what their walk with God was like. I love the story of Jacob wrestling with God, and one of the things that we sort of slide over in that story is that he was under great duress. He had left Laban, he was coming back, he had Esau to face, and he had his family and all his belongings, and at the beginning of that chapter, he has sent everything he owns ahead of him, and he's behind them feeling protected by that. And then he wrestles with God, and in the morning he strikes out ahead, and he's now relying on God. But one of the things that happens as they wrestle is that the angel of the Lord touches the socket of his hip in order to win the fight. And it says that from that day forward, Jacob walks with a limp. And I wonder how many of us want to have that moment with God, that revelation, that experience with God where we know and we wrestle with him, he renames us, we have this amazing event, but none of us want to limp after. Like none of us want to be transformed, to be changed in a negative way as well as a positive way. And I wonder in the days and weeks and months and years to come for him, as he was limping, how often he remembered that moment when he wrestled. And that's a gift that, as we look at it properly, we have these moments, right? And we can look back to these experiences, these mountaintop experiences, to say, God was with me. I have purpose. There's reason for this. But sometimes it takes the limp to remember that, right?
Yeah.
And so in the church, I think we should not only pray for the limp to go away, right? To find the purpose in what, find the experience in that,
Yeah.
right? Because we're all in a place where we need to be vulnerable with each other, with God, with ourselves, and be able to move forward into whatever it is he has called for us to do.
Yeah.
Because, like I said at the beginning, it's not like this is a surprise to him. Like he knows that this would be your journey.
Yeah.
And he loves you and called you to it. And he knows that you will fulfill all the things that he wants you to do through it, despite the limitations.
Yes.
Because he isn't limited. Sometimes we think we're limited by those things, but he's not.
No,
Yeah.
he can do a lot with us and through us.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing with me.
It was nice to visit with you today.
God bless you.
Thanks, you too.